and I'm with Transition Advisors. Our webinar today is Accounting Firm Value and Factors Impacting Firms in the Mid-Atlantic Market. Before we begin, we need to cover a few important items. First, please close any other programs running on your computer. This will help to ensure quality presentation and reduce any audio issues. Transition Advisors, LLC is a proud and approved sponsor on the National Registry of CPA Sponsors per NASDA. In order for you to receive your 1 CPE credit for today's webinar, you must complete 2 requirements. The first is that you participate in all 3 of the polling questions that we'll have throughout the presentation today. And please note that GoToWebinar does monitor your participation in these polls. Next, you will complete an online evaluation that will appear in your screen immediately following the webinar, so be sure not to close your browser once the webinar ends until you've done that evaluation. Once both of the requirements are met, the certificate will be emailed to you within 10 business days. Now, in order to fully participate in the webinar, please take just a moment to familiarize yourself with the GoToWebinar control panel. You should see that on the right-hand side of your screen. There's an orange arrow near the top of the panel, and that will minimize it. During the presentation, the participants are muted, but you can communicate with us by using the question box toward the bottom of the panel. Just type any questions you may have in the box and click send. Time permitting, our presenter will answer all of your questions at the end of the presentation today. Finally, I'd like to remind you that Transition Advisors offers a free 1-hour CPE webinar each month. Our upcoming topics include internal succession readiness assessments, valuing accounting firms, and growing your firm through new practice niches. For a complete list of our webinars, including links to register for them, you can visit the CPE courses section of transitionadvisors.com. As a reminder, you received a link in the reminder email to download a copy of today's presentation. I will also be sending the link momentarily via the chat function of GoToWebinar, so you're welcome to click on that if you'd like to follow along or download the slides. Now I would like to introduce our presenter for today's session. Nancy Egan is the Managing Director of Transition Advisors. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy today's webinar.
Thanks, Nikki, for the introduction. I'm going to be talking today, and thank you everyone for coming to the webinar. We're going to be talking about firm value for accounting firms, and specifically some of the factors that impact that value, and some discussion about what's happening in the Mid-Atlantic market. Just to give you 30 seconds on Transition Advisors, we're focused exclusively on the accounting profession, and within that domain, we are focused again on ownership transition, and internally to an organization that can mean anything from helping you plan for admitting new partners, how to retire partners out without causing financial hardship to the remaining partners. Externally, if you're looking to grow through merger and acquisition, we assist our clients by trying to understand what their objectives are with M&A, and then looking for candidate firms that may meet those objectives, and then helping them structure and negotiate a deal to add that firm. What I'm going to talk about today is really the economics in play right now that are impacting value, how that's impacting value, and we'll talk a little bit about various deal structures that are available to you. So what's going on in the M&A marketplace? Just to give you a brief recap, this profession is 94 billion people, billion in revenue, 500,000 people, growing at just under 3% a year. So what keeps CPAs up at night? Fee pressure from existing talent, existing clients, but I can tell you just about everybody I speak with is complaining about the challenge to recruit and retain young talent that can ultimately grow in and be mentored into more senior roles and ultimate equity in the firm. The talent is extremely scarce right now, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit. Firms are expanding beyond traditional services in order to be more competitive in the marketplace. Clients are looking for more hand-holding and personal service. But this last bullet point is one I think you really want to give some consideration to. At any point in time, approximately 36% of your business clients are potentially considering switching firms. So being proactive with business clients in order to retain that business is just as crucial as going out and finding new clients. Okay, so a top concern is bringing in new clients, and the AICPA polled just under 600 firms in 5 different classes of size according to ownership. And what's interesting is that bringing in new clients ranked #1 in 3 of these 5 classes, and it ranked no lower than 3rd in any of those. So that's a key concern that people have. By way of background, why is M&A activity so high? And I can assure you it is. And if you look at Accounting Today, the online version, almost every day there's another consolidation that you can read about. A few years ago, mostly on the demand side, buyers, it's really all economics. The demand side are the buyers, and the buyers were larger firms, regional firms, and they've always been the demand side. But what happened when the economy started to slow down is some of the other firms that hadn't really looked at M&A reconsidered it in order to keep their firms on a growth path that was getting more and more difficult to do organically. So demand continued to increase, and so it was really a seller's market. But the demographics of the profession have led to an increase in the number of firms that are coming to market that don't have an internal succession plan, and they have an aging partner team. There's been a lot of development of specializations in order to expand beyond tax and audit, but this supply versus demand thing is an interesting issue that we're going to talk about some more in a bit. Another interesting statistic for you to tuck away, 78 million baby boomers are going to be retiring in the next several years. In fact, here's a more curious statistic. Every 8 seconds, another CPA turns 65, which is awesome to even consider. So demographically, the profession is top-heavy with older practitioners, and those practitioners are focusing on succession planning either internally or externally. It turns out that succession planning is front and center for 80% of multi-owner firms, and 61% of firm owners are over 50. Less than half have a formal succession plan in place. Firms with less than 15 employees, 70% don't have succession plan in place, and very few sole practitioners even have a practice continuation agreement. So this is definitely becoming something of importance. And if you put off succession, what happens? Well, the impact is that nothing good happens. You usually end up, if you haven't figured out how to do it internally and you haven't planned for it, you're either going to end up with some kind of a quick merger with unfavorable terms, or you can simply say, I'm going to work until I can't anymore, and then turn out the lights and lock the doors. A lot of the older practitioners out there that I've talked to, they actually have their clients challenging them as to how many more years they're going to be able to service them, and that's also a motivating factor for firm owners to look at, you know, who's going to replace me when I no longer either want to or am able to do this work. And if you're not proactive in this, you're going to be caught in kind of a bind. So what should you do about it? What you need to do is look within your firm and, you know, around the table, understand for the partners that are sitting around that table, you know, what are their career and retirement goals? More importantly, has that changed since the last time you talked about it. I mean, some firms will have a retreat and then 5 years later they're scratching their head wondering why everything isn't taken care of, and it's because things have changed. Have new partners been admitted? Have partners left the firm? The other thing that's really important is not just to look at how you're going to replace the partner level staff. I have a client who feels that they have the strength on the bench of senior managers to move into partner positions to fill, and meet the timing requirements that the retiring partners have as objectives. The problem that they're having is they don't have the bench below the senior managers to move them into those senior manager positions, freeing up the senior managers to become partners. So when you're looking at your firm, you need to stratify, you need to look at all levels in the organization to make sure that you're going to be able to move people in to backfill as people move up and take on additional responsibility. So when you look at this on an annual basis, you're looking to identify where the gaps are and how you're going to fill those gaps. When should you start this? Well, I mean, ideally you look at, what's the end game as soon as you open a business. Nobody, as a practical matter, ever really does that. But you need to allow enough time, because whether you're transitioning clients internally to an internal successor, or you're going to transition clients externally to a successor firm, with the advent of technology, 3 years is 3 visits. If you are your client's trusted advisor, 3 visits of transitioning and messaging to that client about someone who's going to be taking over your role is not a very long time. So you really should start the process 5 to 7 years out. Internally, you want to mentor whoever it is that's going to take over the role. And remember, you're replacing the role. It's not one body replacing another. If you have a partner that's got, a high level of technical expertise in the international tax arena, you're not going to replace that person with somebody who is, a crack auditor. The supply of sellers is going to increase, multiples on businesses are going to decrease. So you really need to be thinking about it now. In terms of the multiple, 3 years ago, all other terms of a deal being equal, 3 years ago I could position a firm at 1.25 revenue. 2 years ago it came down to 1.2. Last year it was really hard to get anything above 1.1, and this year firms are going to market in the 1 time or 1.1 range, depending on the type of firm, its location, and size. So it's quickly coming down. We're all ready to a polling question, Nikki.
Okay, our first polling question is on the screen now. How many partners are in your firm? You can see the options there: 1 to 2, 3 to 8, 9 to 20, or 21 plus. And just a quick reminder that you do need to do all 3 polling questions in order to receive your CPE certificate. Okay, looks like everyone's had a chance to vote. I'll go ahead and share those results. Nancy, 75% of the folks on the call are from 1 to 2 partner firms, another 19% at that 3 to 8 level, and then the remaining 6% are 9 to 20 range.
Okay, thanks. Okay, we're going to talk about value and how to figure out the value of an accounting firm. We'll talk about the terms. Obviously, I'm big on economics, interested buyers, supply and demand truly, and then what sort of attributes that your firm might have or a successor firm might have that would impact how they see value. Always remember that beauty's in the eye of the beholder. What looks great to one firm that you would consider merging in with may not be of interest at all to another firm, and the overall nature of your practice. Everybody always wants to start with the multiple on a practice. People will say, what's the multiple? What's the multiple? And as I just described, multiples are coming down. I don't know where they're going to go. I can guess they're going to continue to come down. But if you had a complex algorithm where you could dump all the other terms into the box and turn the crank, the multiple would come out because the multiple is the result of these other terms. So let's take them one at a time. The first term in a deal is there any cash up front? Oftentimes there is no cash up front when you're merging one firm into another. If there is cash up front, it's an advance on the ultimate buyout. It's dependent on the time of year as to how likely a buyer is going to be to agreeing to cash up front. If you're closing a deal in May or June and the coffers are full from tax season, you're more likely to be able to convince someone to give cash up front as compared to if you're in the fourth quarter where everybody's treading water trying to get to the beginning of tax season where cash is very tight. Another aspect that has to do with cash is the treatment of accounts receivable. When you execute an agreement to merge or sell your practice to another firm, the accounts receivable and WIP as of the effective date of that deal belong to the seller. We have had situations where the seller agrees to allow the buyer to collect those accounts receivable and then pay them back over an extended period of time. This can relieve the working capital requirements that a buyer firm might experience because they basically have to float the firm, for 3 to 4 months in order to get back to having, current working capital to work with. And then how long they see that it's going to take to recover their investment in the firm. Another aspect or term to a deal is the retention clause or guarantee. Many deals are done exclusively on client retention, so they're basically an earn-out model where a certain percentage of the revenues coming in from the clients that the seller brought to the table is paid out over any number of years. Now, it can be that there are variations to 100% earn-out. For example, a retention clause. The theory is if the clients have stayed for 2 years with the successor firm, then they've transitioned and they will continue to stay unless the buyer does something crazy or annoying or does something with pricing, and then it's really after the second year, it's buyer's client to lose. So sometimes we'll have the price lock after 2 years based on what the last 12 months revenue were. So there are hybrids to all these. Fixed deals you rarely see. If you do see them, they have a severely negative impact on the multiple that you're going to get. So a third aspect in terms of the terms is the profitability. And it's, what's the seller's current profitability, but more importantly, what's the buyer's anticipated profitability? The buyer firm is going to be looking at the work that's actually done for the clients that they're acquiring and recast how that work will get done given a change in maybe technology, also staff resources that can be brought to bear that are less expensive than what are being used by the seller firm. So the buyer's really looking at a pro forma profitability of the firm. Tax ramifications are also highly impactful. Many of the deals that we see are really structured as a consulting agreement where the buyer is making payments to the seller and gets an immediate write-off of those payments, as opposed to an asset sale where there's capital gains and goodwill amortization involved. So if it's an all consulting deal, that's likely to increase the multiple on the deal. And then the length of the payout period. Generally on an earn-out, the payout period can be anywhere from 3 to 7 or more years. The longer the payout period, the higher the multiple. So the multiple is really the result of all of the other terms. You can almost think of the multiple as a barometer of the risk that's getting passed back and forth between the buyer and seller. So, for example, if there's cash up front, the multiple is going to ratchet down somewhat. If the length of the payout period is extended, the multiple will go up because the buyer is, by extending the payout period, the entire deal is made more affordable. So when you start with the multiple, you're really starting in the wrong place. You really need to start with the other terms of the deal. Other things that can impact value of a firm, location and size. If you're the only CPA firm in your zip code, the number of prospective buyers for your firm is vastly diminished. However, if you are large enough to meet a buyer's threshold for a satellite office, size can operate in your favor in that regard. Size can also be a negative, so it's a positive and a negative. If you're large enough to be a satellite, that's good. I have a client who has a practice that's about $2 million, and he has told me that when he ramps it up to $7 million, he'll be ready to sell. And what he's not understanding is that the field of potential buyers who could digest a $2 million practice is vastly larger than the field that could digest a $7 million firm. So that's, size is something you need to be thinking about. In my market, who are the prospective buyers, and are they large enough to acquire my firm? Also, any particular specialties that you might have. You might find a buyer that has that same specialty and wants to add to it, or doesn't have it but wants to get into it. They're always looking for cross-sell opportunities. If your successor firm offers services that you don't currently offer, they're going to be looking at your clients to see what the opportunity is to cross-sell those additional services to them. Again, profitability on a pro forma basis from the viewpoint of the buyer. They're also going to be looking at the client makeup to understand and gauge the risk of attrition. You know, if all of your clients have been with you 40 years and they don't have heir apparent, then there may be some concern that some of those clients are going to go away versus transition to the combined organization. And the last bullet probably should be the first bullet because of what I alluded to before. Everyone is looking for talented staff to add to their mix. And if you have on staff some young, eager, mentorable people who could ultimately become senior managers and or partners in the combined organization when you merge, that will definitely sweeten the deal and generate a lot of interest in the market. Most deals include all of the non-personal furniture, fixtures, and equipment. They expect that the staff is going to join the firm. They really want any staff that has a client-facing role to join the firm in order to foster retention. They're looking for where's the opportunity to grow this existing base through fee increases for new services to that base. They'll also be looking for your referral sources and whether those referral sources can be transitioned as well. Generally, a deal will have a new business incentive clause. So if you as a selling owner of a firm, most administration is centralized, so a lot of your time around administration, billing, collections, HR, and all that will be centralized and taken off of your shoulders. You can choose to use your rainmaking skills to refer new clients in and generally be given a new business incentive to do so. We're on to polling question number 2.
Okay, I've launched the second poll. You should see it there on the screen. This question is, which best describes your personal situation over the next 5 years? You'll see the options there that you're seeking to reduce your time commitment, you have partners seeking to reduce their role, you're interested in acquiring a firm, or none of the above. We'll give everyone about 30 seconds to answer, and don't forget that you have to do the polls to get the CPE credit. Okay, it looks like everybody has answered. Nancy, 41% of our attendees say that they are seeking to reduce their time commitment, while 35% are interested in acquiring a firm. We've got 6% that have partners reducing their role, and then the remaining 18% selected none of the above.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's talk about how to structure an external sale. There are a number of different structures you could consider. A straight sale is basically you're immediately getting bought out of your practice. So your role in a straight sale is focused exclusively on transitioning those relationships to your successor firm. Buy into a buyout is kind of a different kind of structure where a person buys into a firm and becomes or paths to become an equity owner in that firm. Maybe someone that existing firm thinks will be able to replace their roles when they ultimately retire out. They may or may not bring clients into this newly combined entity. A merger, this is where the partners of one firm become part of on the team, become one of them, if you will, partners in the combined firm. So you could have a 4-partner firm merging in a 2-partner firm. Now you have 6 partners, but the pie is much bigger than it was before. There can be a lot of advantages to doing that kind of a deal, either by looking at the opportunity of cross-selling of services, being freed up of administrative work, being able to build the pie faster than you can build your own firm. Carving or culling out clients. What this happens, there are a number of situations where this can happen, but the one that I've seen the most is where one of the partners has some kind of a life-changing event take place and abruptly is looking for a way to slow down or exit the firm. If the other partners are able to take on and support the existing clients and push down some work to lower levels in the organization, then that's really, the best solution. Oftentimes it's not the case, and so the partner that had the life-changing event, basically we call out that client base and then sell that out to another firm separately, and basically breaks off from the one firm. Now there's another kind of a hybrid deal called a 2-stage deal that we've done a lot of in the past. And a 2-stage deal is really the best solution, it seems, in the market that we're in right now, because it uniquely addresses the situation where you have an older practitioner who isn't ready to stop working but doesn't have any internal succession options. There's nobody on staff that could be mentored to replace that person. So what they want to do is continue working but know who their successor is and that is in place. So a 2-stage deal basically allows the owner to sell their equity but stay on and not have the exposure that they would have in one of these other kinds of deals. And I want to talk a lot about this 2-stage deal because it is kind of different, but it's advantageous for a lot of people that are in the market right now. Okay, just by way of background, a 2-stage deal obviously has 2 stages. Day 1 of stage 1, the terms of the entire agreement are laid out. In other words, you're really going to go into stage 1 of working full time and deferring your buyout payments until the beginning of stage 2. But what those buyout payments are going to be is defined day 1. In this market, with multiples dropping, people that got into a 2-stage deal 2 years ago or 3 years ago with a 1.25 multiple, if they had waited 3 or 4 years that deal, they'd see their multiple being at 1.1. So they were able to lock in kind of a current market rate without actually getting out of, slowing down and getting out of being in the business of accounting. In stage 1, the successor takes on all of the costs of operations, labor, rent, administration, and and the seller is paid a percentage of gross collections from the original clients while they continue to work full-time. And the way that's figured out is you figure out how the owner benefits from his practice financially through salary, perks, and benefits, the total of all that, whether it's a car lease, contributions to a retirement, all the perks and benefits are added to how he salaries himself, and that number is divided by revenue and comes up with a percentage. Say it's 40%. So 40 cents of every dollar that comes in the door ultimately ends up in the owner's hands. So what happens during stage one is you continue to work like you did before without the administrative piece, taking care of your clients, and for every dollar that comes in, you're going to get 40 cents of it. So and it's paid out as though you're a consultant. So if the revenue goes up because there's a fee increase, or those clients are cross-sold additional services that the successor firm offers and you didn't, you're going to get a higher amount. You're going to get 40% of whatever it is. If there's attrition and that revenue number's lower, you're going to get 40% of a lower number. So you're paid on a percentage of collections from the clients while you continue to work full-time. There's a huge advantage in terms of from a tax perspective. You get paid as a consultant. We would recommend that you keep your entity open, take the payment into your entity, and then salary, perk, and benefit yourself the way you're used to doing. And then from the buyer's perspective, he isn't actually buying the practice yet. He's not making any buyout payments. He's paying you what you're used to making in order to get the work done. And you get the immediate write-off of those payments. And your time commitment isn't really the critical factor. You're getting paid on a formula. So if you have, if you get relieved of some of these duties that you had and have more free time, you can decide, you know, if you want to improve your quality of life or whether you would rather, you know, do some rainmaking out there. The advantages to the seller of the stage one of a two-stage deal is it is truly like having a practice continuation agreement on steroids. You have the backup and support of a larger firm. You have the resources if you need to call upon them. You have the the opportunity to cross-sell their additional services into your base, and you know from day one exactly how your buyout's going to take place, and if you pull the trigger on that buyout happening sooner, it mitigates the loss of clients. This is kind of counterintuitive. I speak with a lot of firm owners who see merging their firm in with another firm as being very, very risky. And what I try to explain to them is that suppose you have a $500,000 firm. If you were to lose a $50,000 client, chances are you couldn't reduce your overhead, you couldn't reduce any of your labor costs. That $50,000 loss of revenue is going to go right to the bottom line and reduce your net by $50,000. If, on the other hand, you are in a two-stage deal in stage one, where you're getting paid 40% of all the revenue that comes in from your clients, if you take a $50,000 hit because a client leaves, you don't lose $50,000. You lose 40% of $50,000. So you're really mitigating the risk of attrition during stage one in a two-stage deal. You have backup and support of the larger firm, as I mentioned before. You get to work less because you don't have to do the administration, HR, recruiting, billing, collections. All of that is taken over by the successor, so you have more time to focus on transitioning your clients, introducing them to the benefits of the combined firm. You could develop new clients, or you could just work on your golf game. The idea of stage one as an opportunity to get clients used to your successor firm leads to higher retention of clients once the buyout ends, and higher retention made for your profit. the advantage to the buyer, most advantages to the buyer during stage one are really the synergies that they're going to accrue. For example, if they're going to move you and your staff into their offices, they probably, depending on your size, they may or may not have to invest anything in their current offices, but they're definitely going to be able to save the rent that's been paid by you for your offices. That is something that will accrue to them. Likewise, the incremental cost for them to put you on their software, their malpractice insurance policy is probably a lot less than what you pay as an independent firm. So that savings also, anywhere that they can shave expenses that were in your firm accrue to them during stage one. And they are also looking, I mean, the whole purpose, objective from their perspective is to grow their firm with new clients. And so the fact that there's going to be a better transition of clients is to their advantage as well. Okay, so when does stage one end and stage two begin? The end date for stage one is a date certain in the contract that gets executed day one of stage one. So if what you wanted to do was work 3 more years, then it would say in the contract at the beginning of stage one that 3 years out on that date, you will hit your goal and of what those buyout payments are going to be, the percentage will be predefined. Now, if you, after 2 years, decided that, you know what, I think I'd like to, I'm comfortable that my clients are happy, you know, I'd really like to spend more time with my grandkids or whatever, you can notify your successor firm that you are going to exit earlier than the 3 years that was defined in the contract, and you are allowed to do that. What's not allowed is for the buyer to push you out prior to that 3-year date certain. So you have flexibility to call when stage one is going to end and stage two is going to begin. Once stage two begins, if there's a retention period, we're going to lock the price after 2 years, for example, as I mentioned before, that the clock starts running when stage two begins. So it's 2 years from the beginning of stage two that then we'll figure out what the most recent 12-month revenue was and then lock it and fix your payments for the remaining term of the payment period. You also typically would have the opportunity to continue working, but in a reduced capacity, and on tasks that both mutually agree for you to continue working. So you could presumably work part-time for many years after the buyout has begun. And typically the way you get paid is 1/3 of the chargeable hours their bill after they're collected, just based on the
I'm sorry to interrupt. You cut out just for a moment there. Could you repeat just your last point, please? The retention period point? Yes. If you could just start from there, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay. The retention period, if there is one. And a retention period means when the buyouts begin, they're based on revenues coming in from the clients. And sometimes there is a lock. In other words, it says that after 2 years of those clients coming back, we're going to look at the 12-month period that was just passed, and we're going to say, okay, that's a proxy for the value of this company, and we're going to continue to make payments as though every year it was fixed at that level. And the idea is, as I mentioned before, that after 2 years, the clients have transitioned, and if they leave after that, it's because of something the buyer did, so why should the seller have to bear that risk? Then, if there is no retention period, it's moot. You can work part-time for the firm, and as I mentioned, the way you get paid working part-time is based on collections on chargeable hours that both parties agree they want you to do. So, so if you think about it, what's going on in stage 2 is you're getting your buyout based on revenue and collections from your existing clients. You can be paid for chargeable hours that you do, and more often than not, you also would be offered a new business development incentive. So if you're a rainmaker and you take that time and free it up from nothing to do administration and go into the marketplace and bring in new business, you're a rainmaker and you refer business in, generally they'll give you a new business incentive. It's kind of like a sales commission. You don't have to do the work. That's the great part about it. But you get paid, and that can be anywhere from 10 to 15% of the revenue collections from those referrals for the first 1 to 3 years. It's an item that can be negotiated. So during stage 2, you really have 3 different cash flow streams coming from your successor firm. Okay, so how do you select a successor firm? There are a number of things you need to consider. What are the specialties that you offer? You better make sure that they're a capacity issue. If the test work, we're considering merging in with a firm that used to do audits and got out of it because they didn't want to do it. So they really didn't have the capability to take on those clients. So not a good selection for a successor firm in that case. How big is the successor? What are their retention rates? Do they have the excess capacity to take over servicing your client base? Do they have the credentials to take over? Are they close enough that if you move into their offices, you're not going to lose clients? But even more important, it's less an issue of losing clients because oftentimes you're going out to the client. What you're more likely to lose if you're not sensitive to the location is you're going to lose your employees. And if your employees have client-facing responsibility, you don't want to lose them because they're a key factor in retention. And then culture. You want to make sure that you're comfortable with this organization, not just because you're going to live there for a while, but if you're comfortable with it, and your clients are comfortable with you and your culture, it's going to make the transition of those clients that much easier. And then finally, the lunch test. If your successor that you're meeting with is not somebody that you would want to go to lunch with, you don't want to do the deal. It's just as simple as that. There are 7 steps that we recommend in putting a deal together. And it's not just the 7 steps, but it's the order of those steps. The first thing you're going to want to do is put together some kind of practice information that you can provide to candidate firms that you're going to have conversations with. Not only financial information and types of on your staff, but you also want to know what your goals are. It's important to be upfront with that, because there could be, you know, in amongst those goals, what are the things that absolutely have to be there in order for you to do that deal? To be upfront about that at the very beginning can save yourself a lot of time, because if there's a must-have that truly is a must-have, and it's not going to be able to be fulfilled, then the conversation's over very, very quickly, and that's a good thing. And you want to have in your mind what your merger partner should look like, because if you don't know what you're looking for, you're not going to know when you find it. And you'll have a difficult time distinguishing one candidate firm from another if you haven't in your mind pictured what this looks like. Once you have gone through steps 1 through 3, then it's time to go ahead and have your initial meetings. Okay, so what are these meetings for? You have a first meeting, we call them first dates, a first meeting with anywhere from 3 to 5 or more firms. And the purpose of it is to just get a sense, would you have lunch with this person? Is there some chemistry there? Are they like-minded about how to support clients and how to treat employees? You want to share information about your goals and objectives, and particularly your must-haves. And you want to hear from them what their view of it is, their must-haves are as well, so that you can determine if there's a misfit right up front. Discuss with each other what success looks like. And then narrow the playing field to your top choice, or maybe you've got 2 that are really in the running, and get rid of the ones that are clearly not a fit. I think I have the record for the shortest introductory meeting, 15 minutes. And within 15 minutes, the buyer and seller knew that it was not a fit, and the meeting was over. More typically, these meetings last from an hour to an hour and a half. If you find a firm that meets your criteria, meets your must-haves, you have chemistry with them, they have a similar culture and view and goals, then the next thing is to get a non-binding offer from that successor firm. And that non-binding offer is a high-level description of how they would see the 2 firms coming together logistically, financially, what the roles will be, how the must-haves are going to be addressed, maybe some issues, a description about client transition, how they want to retain the staff. So you really want to get something, in writing from them. I call it a stake in the sand because it can move a little bit, but once it's agreed, then and only then do you launch into due diligence. If you do due diligence before you have an agreement on high-level terms, you could be spending an inordinate amount of time digging into the weeds only to find out that you're miles apart. Due diligence. From the seller's point of view, if they've done another merger, you want to find out about it. You'd like to talk to the person that merged in so that you can get a better sense of how that process worked. You want to do some background checks, make sure they aren't in any kind of malpractice or licensing trouble. What are their retention rates? If they can't keep their own clients and staff, how are they going to keep yours? Make sure they've got the technical skills to support your clients. If you're merging in and not doing a 2-stage deal or a sale, then their partnership or owner agreement is going to be really important, because ultimately it's going to tell you how, what kind of impact you'll have in governance, how you'll be compensated, what deferred comp will look like, and then if there are any other special practice needs. So you're transposing your firm into theirs. From their side, they're going to be looking at metrics. They're going to be looking at your billing rates, but once again, they're really going to be looking at how to get the work done in their environment with their staff. Differences in the profitability are not always that important, because it's the pro forma profitability that they're going to be looking at. They're going to be looking at the retention risk in your base, and they're going to be looking at some culture issues. So they're doing the same kind of transposition, just on the other side of the table. And then you need to have a plan for transitioning your clients, and clients really have 3 main fears. One is the trusted advisor I'm used to working with still going to be there, and that trusted advisor may even be a staff person. Second thing, is it going to cost me more money? And the third thing is, do I have to travel further to get to see my trusted advisor? And those need to be addressed proactively, always selling the not the loss of your firm, the gain, the added expertise, the support that's going to be coming from the combined firm. So you go out into you try to proactively convince your clients that this is a good thing. You hold it out as a merger, not a sale, and try to allay those fears. You probably want to have a specific plan. Each client, how are they going to be communicated with? What's the messaging going to be? What's the timing of the messaging? And remember that the most important part of the transition is what we call the front of the curtain transition. This is the client-facing piece, which is where you're probably there all the time. What's happening behind the curtain? Who's doing the heads-down work? Quite frankly, clients don't know if it's hamsters and wheels. They just They know what's happening in front of the curtain. They don't know what's going on behind the curtain. So it's that role replacement in front of the curtain. You can also have the phones answered, especially during the transitioning. Always positive messaging. Again, it's all in the packaging. Employees also need to be transitioned, and some key employees would need to have individual meetings. Others can be done in groups. You always want to emphasize the positive. What you don't want to do is do this before you really know what's happening, because the human condition is voids in the brain filled with negative, not positive. So until you know exactly who the successor is going to be and how that transition is going to take place, you don't want to tell anybody anything. You want to be able to proactively assure them of all the positives. So how do you assure that your merger is going to work? Well, as I said before, the first thing is be clear about what your goals are. Be clear about communicating those goals to your successor. And likewise, expect them to do the same. Because there's no sense in having surprises at the 11th hour. Share what success looks like. And don't pretend that it's not going to get frustrating at some point. If you've ever gone through a software conversion, you know how frustrating that can be. There's the learning curve. There's, oh, I can't find this. You might as well just get ready for it, get your head wrapped around it, because there are going to be some things that are not going to be fun. But also note that not everything has to change day one. We've had people do deals in the fourth quarter or January. Guess what? Nobody converts the tax software till after tax season. It just doesn't make any sense. And the changes that go on behind the curtain versus the changes that go on in front of the curtain don't have to be exactly synchronized. Okay, that's it. We're on to polling question number 3, Nikki.
Okay, I've just launched our third and final polling question. Don't forget you have to do all 3 to get your CPE credit. This question is, what is your greatest concern about succession? And here your options are yielding control, client retention, buyout terms, or other risks. So we'll give everyone just a moment to complete that. And then I do apologize. I know we've had just a few little audio issues. If you have a question that came up because of something that was a little unclear and you'd like to send that to us now, we do have a few minutes where Nancy could answer those questions. Otherwise, I'm sure she'd be more than happy to reach out to you and speak one-on-one with any additional questions you may have. Okay, just one more moment, and then I'll go ahead and close the poll. So if you haven't voted, please do so now. And the results are now on the screen, so it's a fairly even split between the first 3 options. 38% chose client retention, 31% yielding control, 25% said buyout terms, and then 6% selected the other risks.
I know I went through the information fairly quickly. As Nikki said, I'm more than happy to answer. We got a couple of minutes to answer any questions, or I'm happy to reach out to you later this week or next week to see if there were any questions as a result of the presentation. I hope I didn't confuse you.
Okay, well, thanks so much, Nancy. We don't have any questions coming in now, but I just wanted to remind everyone that as I end the webinar, please don't close your browser window just yet. You'll want to do the post-webinar evaluation that will pop up, just a brief survey for you to provide your feedback. You'll also receive a follow-up email from Nancy either later this week or early next week, and her contact information is on the screen if you'd like to reach out to her in the meantime. But we thank everyone so much for attending today's webinar, and we hope you'll be able to join us for a future session.